You know, these things are only possible because we get support from the people who are our major sponsors, but also from all of our members as well. And we get to cover important topics, things that we think are important to the community. And I want to thank everybody who does that. That would be, first of all, I want to, show appreciation for my professional staff at PRM, at Public Relations Management people, who's going to be taking a film today, and my staff, Marguerite and Ken. And we work hard to make this community informed. We have in attendance one of our directors, Gleeson, Matty Arison, she's not here yet, but he's supposed to go. And Will Flower, did Will show up yet?
He's probably not going to make it.
Oh, and Michael White will be representing him. And former county executive Pat Halpin over there. And he is now the commissioner of the Suffolk County Water.
Chairman.
Of Suffolk County Water.
Your water rates are still low.
It
As low as they can be. And very clean water.
I think you guys do a great job ever since Mike LeGrandi came in there and made all of those nice changes that kept the water. And then when he bought our water company out of Fire Island, he cut us water down from $13 to $2, I think it was.
I'm glad you told me. There was more revenue.
I don't know what you're charging the Fire Island tonight, because
It's all good. That's the mission of the Water Authority, provide to not-for-profit company the highest rated from a financial standpoint.
By the way, I had Pat come in one day to make a presentation of what the water company does. And he brought all of his staff, and everyone was an expert, and so he didn't have to fake it. And he had brought in everybody who knew what they were doing.
That's why I had them.
That's exactly why you have people who work for you, because they're usually better at some aspect of that job than you are, which is the case with me, for sure. Our annual people, our supporters are Covanta, Louis Joseph Ely's Avalon Law Firm, National Grid, Henry Schein Company, Building and Trades and Construction Trade Council, Gershow Recycling, and Winters Brothers. And today's meeting is sponsored by Gershow. Thank you very much. Where is there is Kevin. Kevin, do you want to say a few words on? No. No? Well, I'll say a few words.
I'll get up and say good morning, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces, some that I've never seen before. I'll make a round and say hello. I've been working for Kevin here for nearly 20 years. 15 plus of those years have been rail related. Oversee leasing, the operating. I speak to the MYA probably, 7 times a day and night, a couple times. Fantastic company that's been providing us service since before my time, and with those challenges that they face, I know as a customer sometimes we're like, what's going on over there? But until you put yourself in their shoes, you don't realize what they're up against to improve service and the headaches that they don't want to even tell you about. But they've been doing a fantastic job. And I met John Gleeson about 3 weeks ago on a surprise visit. I had some time to kill from my Brooklyn yard, and I think he's a great add-on to the team. And I wish him the best of luck. And you'll be hearing from me. He'll be one of my calls. So, all right. Yeah.
You didn't introduce yourself.
I did. Pete Valiant. There we go.
All right. I thought you would be Valiant, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Our program today is about the rail freight on Long Island. provided by New York and Atlantic, Long Island's Rail Freight Company, and has been represented by Chuck Sammel. And I have asked Chuck to introduce the speaker today because he knows more about our speaker than I do, and I thought he'd give us his own interesting flair. Please welcome Chuck Sammel.
Good morning.
I'll abandon this post.
All right. Mission accomplished, sir. I'm glad to see all of you here today. I'm Chuck Sammel, New York and Atlantic Railway, and since 2014, I have served as the commercial director at the New York and Atlantic Railway, which means that I'm in charge of the sales and marketing, those kind of efforts on it. Now, I am the outgoing director of sales and marketing. Will be retiring in February after 8 years here and after, I started in 1978 as a produce inspector in the Bronx for Conrail. So after a long career on the railroad and other places. But fear not, we've actually found someone who I'd say is younger, better looking, and probably smarter than me to take my place, and we have him here, with us today. The thing to remember about our company is that we view ourselves, in addition to being a commercial enterprise that makes money for us, as something of a resource toward both the economy and really the quality of life on Long Island by virtue of our ability to take heavy trucks off the road and do the long haul freight moves on it. So I'm going to introduce to you John Gleeson. I'll give you a little bit of background on John. He started with us in October after we went through a actually very gratifying and thorough job search to find someone who we thought could really take us into the next level as our railroad in terms of our business development. And John's background is kind of interesting. He native of Chicago, who attended or graduated from Loyola, I think I got that right, University, and spent about 10 years working for a family-owned company with a very quaint-sounding name, but it's actually a very important company called Old World Industries. And Old World Industries, if you put antifreeze in your car, or diesel exhaust fluid in your car, or diesel exhaust fluid in your home heating system, a good chance that they manufacture. A very, very big and important company that does that. He then went to work for a company and spent, I think, around 5 years with GATX. GATX is I would say, largest or one of the largest rail car and locomotive leasing companies. So all the rail cars that you see wandering around that are carrying freight, very often, even if they've got a railroad's name on it, they're very often leased equipment. And GATX is a leader in that world. And then following that, he went over to a company that probably everybody in this room has personally participated in, Arizona Beverage, if you've ever had Arizona tea or any of their products, and was instrumental in setting up their rail operations in New Jersey over at the Raritan Center, of a 500,000 square foot of production facility. And he was the one that said to them, guys, you're moving all this stuff in by truck, bad idea. And they're 500,000 square foot distribution center as well, so they have manufacturing and distribution. He brought it live rail, and there are not that many places in the country where you see someone bringing their materials by rail and ship out their finished products by rail as well. And they're doing that. I only wish it was on our railroad and not somebody else, not somebody else's railroad. So without saying any more, John and I are here to, John's going to talk a bit about the basics of our railroad, and we're here to answer any questions that you've got about the railroad, what we do, where we operate. So John Gleeson, please, warm welcome. Try to be quiet, which is not easy.
Thank you guys for having us. I'll start. Chuck and I last week were at a rail conference, and one of the speakers said something that I liked a lot. He said, whenever I'm traveling in Europe and I talk to people, they say, why can't we have rail like they do in America? And everyone in the room thought he was joking, but he wasn't. Everyone in the room thought, passenger rail in Europe is the thing, and gravitate towards it. But our freight rail network in America is really special, and they don't have what we have. And we're capable of doing so much more, and we should expect so much more. So, I'm the new guy at New York and Atlantic, and I've been extremely lucky to be able to shadow Chuck for the last couple of months. For anyone that knows him, knows he's an encyclopedia of railroad knowledge, as well as wine knowledge, as well as obscure rock and roll lyrics, and just about any other subject matter you want to talk about. So when he said that I'm younger and possibly smarter, the younger part's true, but not the smarter part. That's definitely for sure. We run on the New York Atlantic the freight operations across the tracks for the Long Island Railroad. Approximately 270 miles of track. We do in excess of 30,000 carloads a year. When you think of 30,000 rail cars, we want you to think of that as 4 truckloads per car. So 120,000 long haul trucks off the road. Less congestion, less wear and tear on our roads, bridges, tunnels, much less pollution. It should be about 25% of the emissions to move a ton mile via freight rail versus a truck. So when we're moving that through here, we look at our customers. We're in a consumer economy, lots of building materials, your lumber, your stone, etc. Food, we do rice, tomato sauce, beer, propane, paper goods, going out, a lot of recyclables, waste materials, construction and demolition debris. And it's essential that we capture as much of this as we can to keep the stress off of our roads, keep things clear, keep things running easy. And I think that's easy, but then we run into the challenges that we're now facing. And they're similar to a lot of industries. It's staffing. Really, that's number one. And we've been talking to all the big class ones, and when we run, like what he was citing, when things are running tough, there's two edges to that. We've been running into, do we have enough people? And the answer is often no. Lately, we're getting poached by your Metras and all these people that are Amtrak, sorry, Metro. That's a Chicago brain mess up. And so we're worried about our staffing, but we're also have been worried about the class 1 staffing. Because the big challenge for us is we can only do what we have our hands on. And so often, one of the class 1s doesn't bring us cars, we can't get them to our customers, and then everything falls apart. So we're yelling at them, people are yelling at us, and we're trying to win that fight. And we think that the large railroads are starting to turn a corner in a good way. The last couple of years have been extra challenging, obviously, for everyone with the pandemic. And one of the traditional advantages of the large railroads during difficult times is the ability to staff down through furloughs or layoffs, and then strategically, immediately turn the switch and bring people back. That broke. That didn't happen. During the pandemic, a lot of people retired. We lost so many talented people that should have been in the industry a little longer. They weren't hiring new classes the same way and replacing and rebuilding that pipeline. And we run into shortages that way, and service has been very bad. So with that, turning the corner now, what we've been hearing finally on earnings calls, and I think the first one to get it no perfect was one of our Eastern class 1s, Norfolk Southern. They said, okay, we know we have to staff up. And in addition to hiring the staff, and we saw the number that on a call this week with one of the AAR's economists, that year over year, January to January, we have more training, 6.2% more train and engine employees this year than last year, which is a great start. And then on top of that, Norfolk Southern said, the next time we have one of these cycles, we're not laying people off, we're not furloughing people. We're gonna take the people that we have extra time with, we're gonna put them in a classroom. We're gonna make our staff and our workforce more valuable. It's a tough message to deliver to Wall Street on these calls, because for years, they've been feasting on these declining operating ratios, which has been the holy grail. It's profitable and it's great. But they're starting to tell the story properly that record profits are great, but if we have declining carloads on a consistent basis, those are record profits in an industry that's slowly dying. So now they're starting to say, hey, in the short term, there are going to be moments where we're going to have to spend that money, and it's about us growing and becoming better at what we do. we're excited about that, and we're mirroring it. We're such a little diverse. We connect with 3 of the Class 1s, the 2 East Roads, CSX, and Norfolk Southern, as well as Canadian Pacific. We, when we have lost people, we go all in. Our entire operation is like 60 people at New York and Atlantic. And we recently had a class of new people, and we went 6 for 6 on testing to bring in, which was thrilling. It sounds, 6 people, 6 tests for us, that's massive. And immediately after we went 6 for 6, we brought in our next group, saying we're going to keep this going, we're going to hire more. Our next group of applicants that we believe could be viable, 21 people. We've never considered a group like this. Usually we'd still be fighting to whittle this down. In this environment where we need people and we want to build that pipeline, we said we're extending offers to all 21. We're going to get them in a classroom, start paying them, and hey, we hope we can bring all 21. Unlikely, I'm sure there'll be attrition from the offer to who comes in, to who get past the drug test, to all the minutia and who's competent. But we're excited to be aggressive in this space when we need to. After losing people, we're fighting back, and we want to show all of our shippers what we could do service-wise, and it takes time too. These roles are roles where we get people in, and they're not going to be who we need them to be for months or years, and sometimes. So that getting that big number is thrilling for us to be able to make a push to be what we think we could be. Right now we're in excess of 30,000 carloads a year, and we're hoping, and I think Chuck said that we've done some light study on this, that there's a higher ceiling, that maybe that could eventually be a 40,000. And obviously that would take some change in terms of infrastructure, but the people are the first step, and we're excited that we're on that path.
I would just correct you on one thing. The 40,000 is probably a status quo number. If the studies that we've done in past have said that we're at about 31,000 cars last year. But at about 40,000 cars, we've got to staff up, get more power, and probably do some additional yard track construction. And that's a difficult thing to do in an environment where space is tight. Everybody knows New York, it's like, you get a hotel room in Times Square, it's about as big as a shoebox, right? You get a hotel room somewhere else, it's as big as this room. Our yard capacity is like that as well. We do more in a small space than probably any railroad anywhere, aside from maybe a port railroad or something like that, those are peculiar circumstances. So we're confident that we can build up to that number, but like I said, he spoke a very, very sound truth. Yes, is it gratifying and wonderful that we've got 21 people, the biggest class we've ever taken out of one of these job fair events that we've done, who seem qualified to go at least into the next step? Yeah, yes, it is. But the part that's difficult to predict is, the rest of the industry is all trying to do the same thing at the same time, and there is a little bit of a competition for those individuals that takes place. And so when Amtrak will say $50 an hour, 40-hour week, and plus overtime if you want it, lifetime benefits, medical for the rest of your life, it's a little hard for our people to resist, because we've done a lot to try to make ourselves more in that game in terms of salary, retention bonuses, and the like, but realistically, we can't get into that level. And actually not in the Class 1 railroads. So those of you who don't know what John means by a Class 1 railroad, he's talking about a big freight railroad whose name you probably know, like Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, Kansas City Southern, CSX, Norfolk Southern, Union Pacific, Northern, Northern Santa Fe. Whew, I got them all. Right there. There's 7 of them, soon to be 6, because CP and Canadian Pacific and Kansas City are going to merge. Probably this spring. We'll probably be finalized before. So I'm sorry.
No, that's true. The one thing that you said that I do want to touch on is someone who's not native to New York. I've only been here 3 years. One of the most thrilling things, I'm used to, when I've worked in spaces, being on a campus when we have cars coming in somewhere, seeing what some of our shippers do on these tiny plots of land, it's inspiring, really. It's clever, there's a lot of ingenuity, they move things fast, they get stuff done. When I was even over in New Jersey, like he was saying, it was 1 million square feet of building and a huge section of, we had 3 tracks, here, I'll run up and someone will have a little siding where they've just built a ramp up to and they get to work. And it's pretty fantastic.
John, I'd like to know if there was one wish that you could make in infrastructure to make your operations better, what would that one thing be?
In infrastructure, but I don't know that I have like a long-term wish. Chuck would probably answer that better, but I know some kind of low-hanging ideas. We have a specific warehouse building that I would love one of our good operators to take an interest in, because it's in a convenient spot for us. And man, I think we could move stuff out of there. It's like kind of our neighbor.
I would say the greatest impediment to growth, because that's what we're here to, that's what we want. The greatest impediment to growth in our business is probably the space to do the business. It really, despite what I said about, some difficulty hiring and retaining people, despite what I might say about, keeping locomotives in good running order, despite what I might say about trying to operate in the face of 750 daily train starts on the Long Island Railroad east of Jamaica, those are all things that we've always contended with. Where we are right now is, okay, I'll give you the perfect example of it. The New York Times at College Point in Queens now prints almost all the newspapers. They print Newsday, they print the Wall Street Journal, they print Barron's, they print the New York Post, and they print the New York Times. All at that one location. It's not rail served and is never going to be rail served. It's on what used to be the Whitestone branch a long time ago. It's not going to happen. So the question is, how does that paper reach them today? Even in the reduced print media environment we're in, okay, there's a lot of business there for us to get our hands on. Maybe 1,000 cars. That's a big deal on a 30,000 car a year railroad. One new thing for 1,000 cars. Okay, where's it going to go? Nobody's got warehouse space. Who's got a warehouse? Who's got a railroad siding on it? So this is the kind of thing. This is an immediate need that I don't have a solution for. The solution is they truck it down from Canada. Well, that's a dumb idea, but whatever. It's what they have to do. The solution for that is, where is there a warehouse that's got 100,000 square foot capacity that can be able to take this on and handle it? That's on rail, because being direct rail served is a huge advantage over having to do a transfer. It's not a fatal disadvantage if you don't have it, but it's better if you do. So the question is, where is that space? And today the space only exists in one place, and we don't have control over that space. And someone would need to step in and be able to take it, to be able to do it. So I would say that's, if we had a wish, it would be for more facilities that were honestly third-party logistics providers in a lot of cases, but they wouldn't have to be. They could be direct industries that receive.
I think Jim Bonner explained that we have no way of getting into the rest of America except going up to Selkirk, which is near Albany, and then crossing there. Is there any possibility of having an infrastructure that goes right into New Jersey, like say?
Well, there is. There are two ways that you connect, that we connect to the rest of the freight rail world, and therefore the North American freight rail network. One is, yes, it is at Fresh Pond in Queens up to Selkirk around and down. Which, by the way, if you're going into the upper Midwest or the far West, it presents no disadvantage whatsoever. However, the other way that we get to the world is via the Bay Ridge connection, the car flow. Sounds antiquated? Well, guess what? They just put $135 million into this antiquated old system the Port Authority owns, and it's working really, really, really quite well. So there's a couple ways that we connect to the outside world. I don't, Jerry Adler's ideas, aside, I don't know when we would ever see a trans-Hudson freight tunnel.
Well, going back to that, the float system, we had Congressman Nadler come out and talk about a tunnel to circumvent that and be direct. There's certainly a lot of rail connections in Brooklyn to make that happen. Is that completely a dead issue?
I don't know if it's a dead issue, but think of, look, we just spent how many years trying to get east side access, accomplished, and that's small potatoes compared to this thing. my view anyway, it is, okay, in some regards, it's a much greater distance. So, I don't know, how old are you? I'm 67, I'll never see it. What?
You're gonna have a long life.
But then
Look, when I hired Moses as my fireman on my crew, all right, so I am old, but I'm not gonna be here forever.
what happens to the
Really spoke about
mentality?
infrastructure.
What happens to,
You have other challenges that you have to deal with, such that other freight railroads don't have to deal with, such as sharing the track with the passenger. Can you maybe talk about that?
Sure. Our relationship with the Long Island Railroad in terms of operations is actually quite good. Where we hit the limitations, as Kevin is aware and Pete's aware, and is that there is no kind of what I call legal limit to what our train length could be as we come east to head out toward Gershow or toward BRT in that direction. However, as a practical matter, the Long Island doesn't want us to go out with a block of cars that's larger than the sidings they would have to put us into should they unexpectedly, because it is unexpectedly, need to run a train by us, usually because some problem in their schedule on it. So they're reluctant to do that. They can give us special permission. Their dispatchers can say that, but that is not something that you can count on getting every single day to be able to get it. It's an infrequent thing. So Kevin is right in that regard. There is a certain amount of limitation, but guess what? That train length isn't really to me as much an issue, because you could at least in theory, it's done in a lot of places. If you had the people and if you had the power, you could probably run two trains in the same window through an area on it, in between the Long Island trains, or during the very very much off lighter periods, and on the overnight. So I don't worry so much really about that as I worry about places to land it. Because that's why things like any kind of projects that are going on in our operating area, whether it's on Long Island, whether it's in Brooklyn, or whether in Queens, that are expanding the ability to land product. That's what we have to have. I'm less worried, Kevin, about our ability to run trains than I am the ability of where we're going to go when we get there. So anything that that people are working on to expand that is probably something that kind of like supports our ability to try to expand and move more of the freight by rail and take more trucks off the rail. Actual example. Manhattan Beer, who are located among other places, Wyandanch, New York. They've got biggest beer distributor in the United States, a over $1 billion company at this point. They have said to me, their president has said to me, I don't care if I ever see another 52-foot truck show up at my warehouse ever again. I don't want to see them. But nevertheless, what does he have to do? Because he doesn't have a place on Long Island where he can direct receive rail. He's got to do that. He's got to truck out to Wyandanch with big trucks. It is one of the probably more inefficient distribution schemes I've ever seen on it. And they know that, but that's what it is. Yes.
Great segue for my question. One of the drivers of the cost of rail is turn time, which drives capital investment, jacked up contingency for wait time. So my question is, what in your experience, what percentage of time in a year, per se, do you experience delays because you're relying, of course, on other rail lines to bring the product?
Well, you have to define what you mean by delay, honestly, and I'm not trying to be cute. You have to tell me what you really mean by delay. If you mean that we did not receive railroads that have interchanges with each other, we interchange with CSX, we interchange with Norfolk Southern. They do so under the terms of something that's called an ISA, Interchange Service Agreement, on that. And those things usually specify what time of day you're supposed to show up and exactly what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. They're actually fairly precise documents on that. So for example, CSX doesn't run a train today from Selkirk, Albany, New York area down to us, right? For whatever reason. Metro North had a fatality on their railroad, so they shut the railroad down while they investigate. Or they literally had a crew failure or power failure, or for some reason couldn't get down. Okay, that adds a day to the cycle time of anything that's gonna come down into us, so that's the case. But I wouldn't say that we suffer with those sorts of failures every single day by any means at all. In fact, they're fairly infrequent on it. What we saw in the last couple of years should really not be used as a benchmark, or however you like to describe it, a typical activity for what you're seeing out of the railroad, because they were hurting, and the class 1 carriers, the big people, the big railroads were hurting in so many ways. And yes, you are right. Waste Management, our biggest single customer on our railroad in Queens and in Brooklyn, runs out of cars. And when the railroad cars are, if those cars are, coming right now, today, at this instant, and they need those cars, pretty good chance our crew will have those cars to them. It's only 2 miles from our yard. Pretty true. They'll have those cars in the early afternoon sometime, and they can load them, and they can do what they've got to be able to do with them. If the cars are in Southwark, 150 miles away, there isn't a darn thing we can do about that. We have no rights to go up there and get the cars, and they haven't come down to us yet. So that's where it becomes more of a problem. But I think John is correct. I think these. I'm not a big guy for advocating for additional government oversight of a lot of different things. But you know what? The Class 1 guys deserve to have their asses kicked, and Martin Oberman should kick their ass. And I hope he does all the way back. The Union Pacific should fire people. I mean, for the way they're crazy crap they're pulling out west. I'll be blunt with you. I mean, it's 40 embargoes in the month of January. Yes, sir.
Do you envision
I'm getting that.
down the road, when you have these block trains, that they will make direct runs straight into Fresh?
You want me to get my turbine and my?
Yeah, all right, yeah.
If I ask you this every year, that's what you tell me.
Yeah, tell me what I want to hear.
Yeah, you have
You
to
see
tell
them
me.
going straight all right into Fresh Pond and Long Island Railroad, allowing that block for a block train to travel from the east end on our line all the way.
What do you mean? You mean like something?
Meaning,
You mean something more than 40 cars long?
Correct.
I mean,
Well, I'm talking about whether it's 40s, you're servicing 2 customers, or a block train of 100. Knowing Pioneer's track space, do you envision having the ability to run this block train?
well, changes in the future and scheduling things like that, I will tell you, I don't know the answer to. James doesn't know the answer to.
Okay.
And the Long Island Railroad doesn't know the answer to at this
So
point.
that's
Because they just started East Side Access. The plan was originally going to be that with pre-COVID, there would be 900 trains a day on the railroad, not 750 on it. We were trying to figure out where are we going to run at that point. Now, fortunately for us, I guess that's been backed off substantially. We still have never been able to get them to actually publish us in their timetable. I don't think they will on that. Their trains are in the timetable. So anyway, sir, you're next.
In the New York Times printing plant example,
Yeah.
you said that the paper all comes down from wherever by truck. And you were saying it would be a better system if there were a big enough warehouse someplace that it could come in by rail and then be reloaded on trucks and brought to the plant?
Correct.
So that wouldn't be optimum, but it would be better. It would take some trucks out of the Bronx.
It's actually the way most freight moves a great deal of freight that moves on the rail does not go directly to its consumer. It goes to some sort of distribution point, privately operated or public or owned maybe by the industry, that then fulfills that last mile function somehow. Yeah.
What's BRT?
Brookhaven Rail Terminal. Yes, sir.
You guys were talking about, I guess, the potential for longer trains, but it's my understanding that most of the freight around the country is double stacked cars, and but there's no those types of trains are too tall for whatever reason to get out here. What would it take to what infrastructure work would be needed to allow that to happen, and what could the impact be?
What John was referring to is intermodal trains that are in what we'll call 20 TEUs or their equivalents. In other words, containers that are stacked in rail cars that ride low, so they can be stacked double high. You need 23-foot feet more or less of clearance to be able to do that. We have 17. So you can obviously understand that that's impossible. Okay, so what's got to be done? Think of every place where a bridge goes over the railroad or the railroad goes through a tunnel, starting a little bit south of Selkirk, I'm going to say around Hudson, New York, and coming all the way down here just to get to us to be able to then get out onto Long Island. So how many $1 billion would that cost? I don't know. I'm on it. But then the question is, all right, so we did that. All right, where the hell are we going with it now? All right, where's the intermodal terminal? I mean, you know, when it was suggested we try to do something like that many years ago, before my time at Pilgrim, I mean, it was you know, greatly opposed by many people. So you know. Yes, sir.
Quick question. First of all, thank you. Welcome to Long Island. People here are very polite this morning. In the future, I remember that debate in Pilgrim. It would have been great, but obviously it didn't happen. I just want to get back to the numbers again in terms of capacity.
Sure.
So you talked about your capacity. You have a capacity up to 40,000. Beyond that, you know, you're going to have to do a variety of things that you outlined. So here's what we have on the horizon. You've got Kings Park, who's looking to establish a facility to ship garbage and C&D out. You've got Gershow doing the same.
And bring in aggregate materials and
Yeah,
everything.
bring in
Sure.
aggregate, you know, all
Yep.
So you've got Gershow that's doing the same. For years they've said scrap. They're going to be doing C&D going out. You've got Winters that has big plans to do the same, or to take, you know, well, Brookhaven says we've got nearly 780,000 tons of stuff that goes into the landfill. We want to rail it out.
Not counting the ash or the auto shredder residue, yeah.
Yeah, and shredder residue and a variety of other things. And also ash.
Right.
Do we really have enough capacity for all of that?
Sure, but here's what, and Pete's heard this, Kevin's heard this, Michael's heard this, there's a few people who have heard this message.
Yeah.
If you're going to do this, there is no room on our railroad to construct the yard facilities to be storing your cars. So if this is something that is an imperative that you get done, that is logical and sensible to your business plan, you've got to be prepared to basically construct sufficient facilities of your own to be able to hold those cars, at least like a day's worth of loading, or maybe 2 days worth of loading. We're also doing some projects. You know, our railroad yard was built. Long Island Railroad, as you might know, is the oldest railroad in the United States that still has its own name, its original name. And sometimes I think that's when they built it too, because you know the facilities are old, have a lot been modernized, and our tracks in good shape. We're not concerned about that on it, but you know, things like you know, a capital project of $500,000 to put in a series of crossovers that will allow us to more easily store some cars. Sometimes that's all it takes, is to do something like that. So we're in process. Actually, I think we're going to try and get started on and have that done this spring over in Fresh Pond. So there's the ability to
How
do
do
some
these
more.
conversations with LIR, how do we get from here to there?
Well, the Long Island Railroad is not going to build a new track for us. The Long Island Railroad, look, why do we exist? Because they finally said we can't deal with this freight stuff in 1994. My God, we brought it down to 9,000 cars a year. You know, it takes us 200 people to handle it. We do 30,000 cars a year with 60 people. Whatever. So it's a different, you know, sort of the environment. So you're not going to. We shouldn't expect to see from them any sort of you know, enormous concession to, oh no, we'll just change our whole operating schedule around so you guys can run some more freight trains. That's not going to happen. However, I do think what would be helpful to us, since our concession to operate the railroad comes under an agreement with the MTA, the state of New York, and the Long Island Railroad, and since that concession only has 4 years remaining on its current term on it, how do we go about, you know, how do our owners go into their own pocket to invest money for the next 4 years, thinking that maybe in 4 years they wouldn't have it anymore? So you won't see that. So if we had a longer horizon, kind of more similar to the first one we had in 20 years, you'd better chance that, you know, that Mr. Lieber and Mr. Gilbertson would open up their wallets and you know, maybe make some investments in certain areas. So,
With respect to them, it's not their wallet.
what's that?
It's not their wallet. It's our wallets.
No.
Long Islanders, I'm talking about.
No, we're private.
Oh, okay, you're private.
Oh, yeah, we don't get any money from you, no.
Chuck, years ago, we had Fred Krebs when he was the president of.
That's your problem.
I know Fred well.
That's really your problem.
And what he stated at that time, we were doing 3% of our freight by rail. Now, I know you're doing a lot more volume than we ever did, but I think it's still 3%.
Yes, it probably isn't 3%. It's probably closer, on Long Island you're talking about? Probably 1.9, something like that. I don't know what exactly.
Really? So it's
Yeah.
actually went down because the
No,
volume
look,
went up?
You know, the thing that maddens us, people like John and I and people on the railroad is to realize that there really is so much out there. I don't know if anybody else rides the highways as much as I do. I'm on 95 a lot, right? And if you ride the Jersey Turnpike, I mean, you would think that the entire right lane on a mile on each side of the is a parking lot for trucks, because there's no room in their normal parking areas for them to go in. So they sit there and they wait for their time to, make their last move into their destination or origin, if that's where they're going.
So it's,
It maddens us. There's a lot out there for us to get, and we don't get it, as much as we should.
but the percentage was 3% then?
No, I don't think so. I doubt it. Maybe 3% if you talk Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, Suffolk. Oh, you know who did a NIM
But you're doing a lot more volume than
volume.
what back in those days.
Pardon? We are. We're at almost 4 times the volume that we were doing in those days. But more freight moves around. Think about it. I mean, Amazon? Who the hell ever heard of Amazon in Fred Krebs' lifetime? Well, Fred's still alive, excuse me. But during his time here. That was Amazon. Yes.
Is there anything manufactured on Long Island that goes off island by rail?
You know what? Probably the closest thing that we come to that is what I'm going to call like a partial manufacturing process. We consider what Gershow does to not be simply, like taking a bunch of scrap and throwing it in the car that looks just like anybody else's scrap. It's a semi-finished product as we see it, more than it is. So in that regard, yes, I would say that's true. Most of what we do, no. As a matter of fact, we've had some discussions with people. We've talked to Eastern Wholesale Fence about trying to get their material off rail by Long Island. We've talked to some other people. It has never really pretty much come to fruition that we do that. We are a recyclables and waste material railroad going off Long Island. Yes, sir. You've been asking for one.
You said before Long Island Railroad is not installing any new track. Who does?
No. I'm not saying they're not installing any new track. My God, they've just spent the last 10 years doing nothing but installing new track. I mean, the way it works we have the right to operate our freight services over certain parts of their infrastructure. And in fact, some of the stuff is reserved, some of the track is reserved exclusively for us. Some of the passing sidings are considered freight-only sidings. They can put a passenger train on if it's an emergency or something, but it's for that. That's what I mean by they're not building a new track. They're not building a new track for us. They might be building a lot for themselves.
Okay, so who is building track for you?
I mean, what companies are doing the construction? Well, we're paying for it ourselves if we build it.
So you're
Yeah, we're self-funded. Yeah, self-funded. Yes, sir.
John Zayer, PRMG, what time of the day or week do you operate right now, and when can you operate?
24/7. Our greatest operating windows tend to be in kind of middle of the night. But don't forget, even at that time, the Long Island's running deadheads because they're running trains to reposition their equipment for the morning rush.
Can you run trains while the railroad is at it's during the daytime
Yes.
or during peaks?
Yes,
and
it's
so
not,
forth?
we have some kind of discrete operation. I'll give you an example. There's a term that's used in the railroad. Everybody operates under some sort of what they call precision schedule railroading now. We laugh about that because that means you do the same thing every day at the same time, the same way. And we have for 26 years had to have our morning train at the stop board just west of Jamaica at 9:30 a.m. or they ain't going out. If they're at 9:35, it's too late. So our guys have got
Going
to be,
east.
well, it doesn't matter either way, one direction or the other.
Okay.
We've got to be at certain points at certain times when we just can't move. They won't let us out.
Chuck, when does the Long Island Railroad advise you on your scheduling, which you don't have a schedule?
Well, in terms of like unscheduled outages as they occur.
No, not on averages, just next week. Did they tell you Monday, Like, these are your operating.
No, we've got a general
How-
understanding with them as to when we're going to be able to move. You know, our train crews will schedule the RS-80 to come on at a certain time, knowing that if they come on at a certain time, they'll be able to go to certain, to certain locations. There isn't like a weekly schedule they hand to us to say this. What they would hand to us maybe on a weekly, or we hope more in advance of that is, oh, by the way, we're gonna have a track outage on, like on March 11th through 14th at this location, we won't be able to run at that location. Yes, sir.
What, I don't hear much about it, but what was the status of that strike with the railroad, and what was it, time on, time off, medical? I got confused with some of the other.
Well, they're joining the club. All the details of that, I don't know, and if I did it, we'd be here till late in the afternoon talking about it. But remember this, the rail environment is a heavily unionized environment. Union contracts always have dates, terms. It is, I honestly believe that more was made out of this than really was there. In terms of, it sounded to me a little bit more like a typical management, company and employee, negotiation process that was going on, with one exception. The BMWE, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees, was a lot more militant than they have been in past. They tend to be, as the railroad unions go, the most militant one. I'm not sure what it is about being a track worker that makes you that way, but it's been that way in my whole, almost 40 years on the railroad. To see that be the stickiest, contract we go through. So anyway, yes, sir.
Ed Romaine has talked to this group, and I think his time frame for Brookhaven landfill being an issue is much more shorter. It sounds like your potential solution is well down the road. Is there a disconnect there?
What do you mean by my potential solution is well down the road?
Being able to do something about the landfill that's going to close.
Oh, no. If all these people were well, today would be a bad example since Amtrak has poached 4 of our senior employees and we're replacing them. But under normal circumstances, if all this operated today, we would handle the product today. Now, guess what? That doesn't mean that Kevin could do something dumb, like say, oh, Chuck, I want to throw 100 cars on your railroad somewhere, so Kevin, we ain't got
That would be 101.
Stop that. Absent, if done improperly, yeah, we wouldn't be able to handle it at all. If done, according to kind of the strictures that I kind of set out a little bit earlier, all right, it happened today, all right. The hardest one to serve would honestly be on the Port Jefferson branch. Kevin, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One of my sons works for a railroad, and he's constantly subject to being on call.
Yeah.
And he tells me that was the problem with the Western railroads. Every other weekend, he's on call. He's got, and if he's called, he has to report to his duty station within an hour. So he can't, in the New York City area, you know what that means?
Who does he work for?
Metro North.
Okay.
He can't go more than 10 miles from his house.
I can't speak for their staffing and those sorts of issues, but I'll tell you what I believe to be completely true for the Class 1 carriers. As John alluded to, when the Class 1 carriers became obsessed with driving their operating ratio as low as they possibly could, the way you do that, one of the ways you do that is you get rid of people you have to pay money to on it. And as we all know, there's not even a fine line. There's a big difference between, the efficient use of your workforce and screwing things up really badly by not having enough people who can do anything. Railroads that run slowly are the most expensive railroads to run. Railroads that run fast, they quickly, and cycle cars quickly are the most efficient ones to be able to operate. So I honestly say, how would I put it? I'm no communist. I believe myself to be a capitalist. I do not believe Milton Friedman's always right about the perfection of markets and that kind of stuff. And I do think that when you are cutting people and you get down to the point, if you get down to zero, then you're fortunately can't do anything because you're at zero because you've gotten rid of everyone.
Well,
Now you can't do anything, but you made a lot of money last quarter. Your
But
10Q
the
is great.
problem, what the problem is, these guys are on call, they're not getting paid, not a dime.
Well, but why are they on call? The question is, why are they on call? Because there's maybe not enough of them in some cases. I don't know about Metro North. The passenger.
They can't get enough people, same
Yeah.
problem as.
Yeah, well, they're stealing from us. I don't know where they're
They don't,
losing.
they don't pass the drug test. Yeah.
No, we just lost it. We have actually lost 2 train masters to them and a locomotive engineer in the last 6 months or so. You know, it was,
What kind of an impact does, you guys train these guys to do these jobs, and
Sure.
presumably for 15, 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. That's a loss to you as well.
it is.
And yeah.
We have never tried, at one point they said, okay, what we should do is we should say, all right, we're gonna hire you, here's the terms of contract you live under, and if you leave before 3 years are up, for something other than being fired for cause. So, you owe us this money back, and try enforcing that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't work. So, yes, sir.
Do you currently run freight trains to all the endpoints on Long Island now?
Not to all the endpoints. We are qualified. Currently, the farthest that we go east on the main line is Riverhead. We are, in theory, qualified to Greenpoint. I'm sorry, Orient Point. Greenport. Excuse me. I don't know when the last time we were anywhere close to Greenport. It's been a very, very long time.
There's a train that goes to State Harbor, right?
We're no longer qualified to Montauk. I suppose if there was some very good reason for us to become qualified to Montauk again, we could try to do that and probably succeed at doing it. The issue with that is when you get into the way they run the passenger out in that area, the top speed on that line is 25 miles an hour, and you can imagine that does to your crew time. If you can only run a train 25 miles an hour top speed on it, our top speed on the Long Island is 50. We go 49, but we don't hit 50, but it's twice that. You burn up crews. In doing it, so it makes you kind of like inefficient.
How about the Port Jeff range?
The Port Jeff range goes as far as Huntington right now. If it should happen that the property at Kings Park gets developed, we'd be going a little farther. We've historically gone beyond that. We used to go to Smithtown probably not that many years ago.
Well, I had my first cell phone, I had a Verizon Navigator on it, I believe, and I'm on a train, and I look at the darn thing, and it says 65 miles an hour. You look out the window, you think you're doing 50, but 65.
Well, passengers faster.
Yeah.
Passengers faster, yeah.
That's important.
How has the railroad's expansion to Grand Central impacted your business?
So far, who knows? Because, it started Wednesday, right? And they're running an abbreviated schedule. So put it this way, any additional trains that are going to go through the Jamaica interlocking could potentially have an impact on how we have to operate our trains on it. Now, not every train does go through, although all those trains do, I believe, on it. So the answer to your question is very honestly, we don't know, and they don't really know yet because they don't really have a schedule yet. They're saying how it's going to run, but the schedule it sounds like they're proposing is on the hour during peak times. What? Once? One? This is what you did this for? Anyway, I don't know.
They like spending money. Yeah.
No. So, I think the project, don't get me wrong, there's all kinds of reasons why that's a good project.
Sure, yeah.
But we don't know what the impact will be, to answer your question quite directly. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Again, John from PRG. I came in late, so I'm not sure if I followed the map and the conversation, but I believe you said that your capacity, you're currently at 30,000 trains a year.
30,000 rail cars.
Rail cars.
Revenue
Okay.
producing rail cars.
Your capacity is 40,000 rail cars.
That's our hunch. We don't know. We've never been there.
Okay, so
Maybe it's
when Brookhaven landfill closes, and you have to take all the ash and all the C and D off of Long Island as compared to now. You can do that at 40,000 cars, or what is your capacity, or are you able to do this?
Well, let's think about it right now. If you take a look at the Brookhaven Rail Terminal right now, that does around 3,000 rail cars a year. I would say this year it's probably going to do around 3,000 cars a year. And I don't know what it's going to do at such point that if the recycling facilities and the waste handling facilities are set up in there. I don't know for sure how many, what the tonnage that'll be. We've had some discussions obviously in the winters, about how that would work. No, what would it have to do? I can envision a day, and we've talked about this among ourselves for a long, long time. we may have enough traffic going to the Brookhaven Rail Terminal that we run a train that does nothing but that, and then run a second train that does all the other things as well. Like for example, if you talk about how we get into Kevin, over in Medford, it's through an intermediary point. Kevin's cars go to Pioneer. Actually, currently the Brookhaven Rail cars go to Pioneer as well, and then crews take them from that point to the farther eastern destination point. What I'm suggesting that in a world where we're running more cars, and even and even if it's done in the most efficient way we can in terms of storing empty equipment, around the railroad, right? I think it's likely that you'll see us have to go Fresh Pond to BRT, and then maybe Fresh Pond to Pioneer to supply the needs of all the other people who are out in that area. Some of whom are like with Gershow, fairly substantial shippers.
Sure.
So,
Chuck, you mentioned 4 years until the contract's done, and
4
years.
Yeah.
So if traffic ends up increasing and you have so many cars, I don't know how, you mentioned 60 people are working right now.
Yeah.
How many engines on the east end?
Well, how many engines? I don't know how many we have.
I'm just trying to put together 4 years from now, let's say the traffic picks up before that, with Bruce
We need more power and more people.
You need more engines, right?
We need more power and we need more people, yes. In our case, what we need actually, what railroads need is, if you have a car that runs perfectly all the time, you don't need a backup car, on it. And what we do is kind of like the belt and suspenders approach to those sorts of things, where if we're going to run a group of cars out to Long Island, you might see us with 3 locomotives out there. We don't need 6,000 horsepower to pull those trains. It can be done with 4,000 horsepower. But we'll have an extra one out there just in case something should go wrong and something breaks down, so that we don't, we're not blocking a main, which would be a disaster. That's short of a mainline derailment, that's the worst thing that can happen, pretty much.
Where's Pioneer?
Brentwood, Bay Shore. Pioneer Avenue. Pioneer Drive, excuse me, thank you. Yeah. Right across the tracks from the ELM Global Logistics and the MJ properties.
So it's in Bay Shore.
Yeah.
What about like a facility like Calverton? They had acres, and it's old Grumman. I mean, it was immense. I don't know why are they still sitting on?
Yeah, well, we're actually having some discussions with some people about doing some expansion out in that area. I think that from the rail perspective, the thing that makes it the hardest out there is the fact that the darn airstrip is kind of inconveniently placed in the middle of that property, and maybe it's a huge and valuable asset that should be preserved forever and ever. But you can't go too much farther than where United Metro Fuels is located right now before you run into the airstrip. So anyway, yes, sir.
You talked about the Kings Park Terminal, which isn't in existence yet.
Right.
Can you give us a little more information on that?
Well, you know what? Toby Carlson has talked to us probably, no kidding, for close to 5 years about it, off and on. What I can tell you is that he is convinced that he has the ability to more effectively handle, ash. He believes that he's got substantial demand in his neighborhood for large volume of aggregate stone for asphalt and ready mix in that area. So he believes that he's got some very, very core business that he could be used to develop it. I mean, he has put together a fairly impressive piece of property, linear though it may be. It's 5,600 feet of frontage or something like that on a railroad.
Where are you talking about, Chuck?
Kings Park.
Oh.
And that's on the Port Jeff line?
Yeah, it's on the Port Jeff line, yeah.
Like Carlson Avenue, that's right by the railroad station up there.
It's where it is right underneath the trestle that goes over the top of, what is that? Town line road. Town line road, yeah.
Yeah, it's from town line pretty much all the way to Old Colmac Road.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said you're looking for more warehousing. Is that where you're gonna look for more warehousing?
Right there, no. You know what? We'll look for the warehouse. Someone else is going to build it, so we'll look for it where someone's going to build it, I guess, is the answer to that. If you want to talk about what's the easiest thing and the most likely, because look, you're going to do service on rail, and you want to build a building, and you want to use rail to handle your product. Do you want to put your building in a place where you know the railroad has a pretty good chance of getting to you 5 days a week to switch your facility? Or do you want to put it in a place where they will struggle to get there 2 days a week and 1 day a week is probably more likely? Okay, to your point about cycle times on equipment and investment and money tied up in those sorts of things, I think the answer is, unless you've got some very strange special circumstances, the answer is no. I don't want to be in place for somebody to get to me 5 days a week. Okay, so then the question is, where are we able to do that? The easiest place to do that is actually without getting involved in Long Island and stay west of Jamaica. But in addition to that, east of Jamaica, on the main line, at certain locations, it's easier for us to run to than it is to get to other places. One thing you can't do if you're running our railroad in the face of the vast number of passenger trains that are out there, you can't do what's called holding the main. In other words, for anything more than like an instant. In other words, if your train's on the main line and you're waiting to switch somebody, you can't stop right there while the conductor gets off and goes out and makes sure the gate is open so that he can get it open, and then you can pull forward and then shove into it and then get out and then hold the main again, and it doesn't happen. That you don't hold the main on out there. Not as a general practice, anyway. Let's put it there.
When they first built the Long Island Railroad, didn't they see any of this stuff coming down the pipe?
They built the Long Island Railroad before the Civil War, so I don't know what this is.
There was nothing but potato farms when they built it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and I want to thank our guests.
Oh, yeah.
And John, that's from Maine. It's from my son's Maple Grove.